Welcome, everybody. Ontario is covered by 46 treaties and other agreements, such as land purchases by the Crown signed between 1781 and 1930. I'm in Renfrew today, the traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada treaties. We begin today acknowledging many, if not all of us, are meeting while residing on Aboriginal land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. As settlers, we're grateful for the opportunity to meet in this way. We thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. We recognize and appreciate the historic connection to this place our Aboriginal friends have. Thank you. It's a real privilege to welcome Beverly Beuermann King to our Pavro platform of professional volunteer leaders and those with a vested interest in the volunteer sphere. Resiliency seems to be a trending keyword these days, hand in hand with a growing emphasis on the health and well-being of everyone working hard, often too hard, to help their families, their workplace, and their communities succeed. It is more than gratifying to be able to consult with someone like Beverly, who specializes in helping people cope with these dynamics. I'm personally looking forward to learning about the tips and strategies she may like to offer us in this context. Please extend a warm welcome to Beverly Beuermann King.
Awesome. Thank you. Hello, everybody, and welcome. There is a lot of information that we're going to try to cover in this period of time because there are 10 essential needs. So that means I actually have to do 10 of them. So let's see if we can get these done in the next little bit. I have my chat open. So if you see me looking over to the side, I have it open. I'm going to be reading the comments. I'm going to be getting you to put stuff in the chat as well. All right. So let's start. I always do a check-in. So I want you to think about how are you doing right now? So which one of these very scientific, well-researched on my scale here do you think you most identify with? Are you a number 1, feeling a little cheeky? Throw it in the chat. Let me know. Are you maybe a number 3? I think I'm going to do a number 3. A little frazzled, a little bit of a bad hair day. I think both of those, and a bit staticky. I think I'm going to go with that one. I'm seeing a 7, a 1, or a 4. That's a big difference, Linda. 1 is like, a little on the cheeky side. 4 is, bucket over the head, not sure what's going on. So that's I think that's two kind of different ones there. Carrie's saying a number 4 as well. I'm not seeing anybody, kind of throwing in here a number 6, which is good. Catherine's saying a 7, although you would like to be more of an 8. Awesome. Oh, 6, because I like it so much. Judy, to me, a 6 looks a little on the angry side. So hopefully you're not feeling, they even put fangs on a sheep. Sheep don't have fangs. They don't even have pointer teeth. So I think for me, that's a little on the angry side. You thought it was happy. I know we look at some of these in much different ways. I've decided that though I interpret it one way, other people interpret it other ways. So why do I put this up here? I think as leaders, it's really important that we continuously do a check-in with ourselves. How are we feeling? How do we start the day? How are we feeling after lunch? How are we feeling at the end of the day? It's important to be able to do that check-in, and it's also important to be able to do that check-in with our groups, our teams, the people around us. How are they doing? Are people feeling energetic, or are they feeling tired out and worn out? I was a 5 when the alarm went off this morning. I like it. All right. So we're going to be talking about resiliency, but we're also going to be talking about culture and how do we have this engaged culture. And part of that is really understanding what is it that our teams need? What is it that our members need? What is it that our colleagues need in order to be engaged? All right. Dean, can you throw that one on mute for me, please? There we go. Okay. So how do leaders struggle, or why do I think leaders struggle sometimes with this? I think we struggle sometimes because we get focused in on the details without looking at the big picture. What is it that we're trying to create? What is the culture that we're trying to create? I think sometimes we get really frustrated with some of the people issues. Any of you ever feel that way? You ever get frustrated with the people issues? Like, I wish people would just do what they said they were going to do. Yeah, I think that's a big one. And then I think we also get into this patchwork approach where we're trying to we hear this flavor of the day and that flavor of the day, or we should be doing this or we should be doing that. And maybe we're not kind of putting it together in a way that actually makes sense. So what are we going to be talking about so that we can go from struggling and frustrated and unsure to being able to have an engaged team where there isn't that toxicity, where we're getting the best out of the people that are around us? So we're going to look at these 10 essential needs. You should have a handout that was sent to you. And so know that at the end of that handout are the most important slides. So you don't need to take all kinds of copious notes really quickly. Know that the most important stuff is in your handout. So let's start with the first one. When we talk about all of these needs, the absolute number one, and this shouldn't come to a surprise to this group because I think you absolutely already know this, but respect and appreciation. And so when we look at these 10 essential needs, they were there prior to the pandemic. I'm going to talk about what are some of the highlights, what are some of the things that we know in the context of kind of having come through the pandemic or going through the pandemic. What is it that our teams need? What are some of the themes that are happening right now? But respect and appreciation. We know that, and again, not rocket science. Employees who had reported that their leader was supportive of them missed half as many work days as those with non-supportive, non-sensitive leaders. We get that, right? Like, that's not rocket science. I think we know that at a gut level. But how do you show your respect and appreciation? What are some of the things that you as a leader do? Or what are some of the things that maybe you're doing within your association? Or what are some of the things that are happening that maybe you've had a really good manager or leader do for you in the realm of respect and appreciation? So I want you to think about that and then throw a couple of ideas in the chat. What are the ways that you show your respect and appreciation? Or how has that maybe been done for you? Let me know in the chat. Simple thank you absolutely goes a long way. I totally agree, Catherine. Allowing for work-life balance. Yeah, allowing people to make choices about when they're going to work or when they need to have that kind of time away, either for personal care, taking care of their families. Maybe it's meeting some of those appointments, all of those things. Impromptu shout outs. Okay, I like it. Feels really nice one-on-one, but it's also in a group setting. Yeah, some people want it in a one-on-one. Some people appreciate having that recognition in front of their peers. Open door policy, but respecting privacy. That's a great one, Linda, because I think as leaders, we've been taught that we should have this open door policy, but we also have to get things done. And so I think as leaders, it's really important that we clarify, what do we mean by that? Does that mean that, hey, come on in, talk to me anytime? And then you get annoyed, you get frustrated, you get angry because of all of the interruptions. What I like is when leaders really define that. In fact, one company that I worked with, they ended up having kind of a code, if you want to say. If my door is wide open, come in and talk to me about anything. If my door is half open, that means I'm probably working on some important things. And if it's important, come and talk to me. And if my door is closed, essentially the leader said, hey, if there's blood, you can interrupt me. If there's no blood, I've got to get this stuff done right now. And so it was just a way of clarifying what we meant, or what he meant, or what they meant by that. Let's see, work-life balance. Some leaders focus on the task, others focus on people. We need more people-focused leaders and empathy for what people go through. I agree. Yeah, part of showing that respect and appreciation is respect for their time, their energy, their education, their contribution. It's all of those pieces, not just the process and getting things done and what's been accomplished. So I like that. Telling your team when they do something really well. Yeah. And not waiting until the performance review. It's making sure that you're doing it. Sometimes we're so busy that we're going from project to project to project that we don't celebrate that we've completed one, that we've accomplished one before we're halfway through the next one. So it's taking those moments to acknowledge. Celebrating birthdays, anniversaries. Like I said, celebrating the completion of tasks, even the milestones along the way. Personalized cards from the CEO and senior leaders. I like that one. One of the companies that I really liked, it was a group of people who were going through a major change and required them to have, to spend a lot of overtime. And what I liked was that the leader not only thanked the team as they were going through this and meeting the milestones, but they actually sent a card through the mail, handwritten, to the family members. And essentially it said, hey, thank you for your sacrifice, because we know that that's a sacrifice on your part as well. So I like that. acknowledging that it's not just the person, that it is about all the people around them. Let's see, listening, seeking input, yeah, asking for ideas, and really listening to those ideas. Doesn't mean that you have to agree with all of them or implement all of them, but where are they coming from? What's the context? Why do they think this would be a good idea? Open door always, unless it's not. Then I have a sign that says I'm in a meeting. Good. Celebrating birthdays. A Facebook private group. Okay, lots of check-ins. Yeah, lots of different ways, whether you have team check-ins, using the technology that's available to you. I think that's great. I think, there's lots of things that we can talk about. The other thing I would say when it comes to showing respect, it's clarifying words such as transparency and equality and fairness, because sometimes they say I'm going to treat everybody fairly, and some people kind of interpret that to say I'm going to treat everybody equally. And that's not necessarily what I mean when I use the word fair. And so it's, hey, I'm going to make decisions based on your circumstances at this particular time. Just because I give somebody a couple of hours off doesn't mean I'm going to give everybody a couple of hours off. I'm going to make the decision based on what's happening. And so it's about being really clear, just like the open door policy. It's clarifying some of these things that we've been taught. Top down is really, really important, but so is peer to peer. And so, when there's peer-to-peer recognition, it's 35% more likely to have a positive impact than it is if it's just coming from the leader. And so what are those ways that you can facilitate peer-to-peer? One of the companies I just talked to last week, they were doing something really, I think, kind of unique in that one person needed, at their team meeting, nominated somebody for recognition. And it was based on their values. So they had their mission, vision, and values, and they lived their values. And so that one person who was nominated was to watch throughout the week to see somebody and to recognize somebody who has really lived those values. That person who was recognized then would be tagged as it, and they would then look for that entire week somebody who has lived those values. And so it did two things. It was a pay it forward type of program. So if I've been recognized, then I'm going to pay that forward to somebody else. But it helped them to really acknowledge those people who were living the values that the company really wanted to highlight, as opposed to them just being on a piece of paper collecting dust, or they're up on the wall collecting dust. They were looking for ways of how are these values lived within the organization. We do peer nominations, thumbs up awards. Absolutely. One company I like, we've always had, the salesperson of the month or the employee of the month award. But one company I really liked, they had essentially, and I don't know what they actually called it, but I'm going to call it this, the screw up of the month award. Now that doesn't sound like it's a very positive thing, but it actually was, because one of their core values was taking risks, thinking outside of the box, taking chances. And so what they would do is every month they would celebrate somebody who tried something new, unique, different. They tried to implement something, and even if it didn't work, they celebrated that. And so that person would stand up and talk about, okay, the thinking process, what did they learn? And part of it was so that they could share that knowledge. So it wasn't like reinventing the wheel over and over again, but it was also celebrating what they valued, that thinking outside the box. Now, I don't think he wanted to get that award every month. I think you wanted to get it on an irregular basis, but I like that because it was celebrating what their values were. There's things such as kudo boards. If you haven't seen a kudo board before, it's where you can do that peer-to-peer nomination or celebration. I've seen it used for people's birthdays where people can write them notes or put memes or graphics or stories or quick little videos that represent that person, and then that person gets it as a kind of like as a takeaway. And I think that's a nice thing to do too, especially sometimes when we can get worn out and tired out. So thinking of all the ways that you can bring that respect and that appreciation to your workplace. All right. It is about looking for these meaningful moments. It's not waiting until the performance review. It's acknowledging them in the here and the now, and it's being really specific. And so one of the things that I think is important to keep in mind when it comes to respect and appreciation is what I call the TMS. TMS stands for timely, meaningful, and specific. And part of that is knowing your team well enough to know what is important to them. So earlier in my chat, I saw, some people like it on a one-to-one. They want to have that one-to-one with you as the leader. And they really appreciate that. Other people would like to have that in front of other people. Some people would like, as a part of your reward and recognition program, really would value an hour off. Other people would really, just, hey, a gift card to Tim Hortons, the next coffee's on me kind of thing. Maybe that's valuable to them. But it's about being specific about the situation and meaningful to the person that you're giving it to. Format and frequency. Again, I would say it has to be genuine. So I wouldn't put it on a frequency basis. I wouldn't say, okay, every week I need to make sure that I recognize Beverly. Otherwise, I start to kind of not value that as much. So I really look at it. So what are the things that you want to acknowledge? And for me, it's things, what behaviors am I trying to encourage? A lot of the time it goes back to what are the values? What are the mission, vision of values? What are the values that we're trying to live within the organization? I have some companies who each month they focus in on a different one of their values. And that's how they do their recognition. So it really is unique to the organization, to the people. And I would talk, especially when it's peer to peer. Like let's talk about this as a group. The one company that I talked to you about every Friday is the pay it forward. Maybe you need to do it once a month, or maybe it's maybe it's weekly. Depends on how many people are on your team as well. Okay. Oh, sorry, Judy, I think I misunderstood that. I think you were referring back to Carrie about the thumbs up award. Okay, I've now kind of put those things together. So hopefully I've kind of got that, given you some information there. So that's the first one. The second one is that people want to know what's expected from them. And I think there's lots of things that we can talk about in a leadership role for that, how that looks. But I'm gonna highlight a couple things here. Here's my guy right now. Hopefully you can see him. His name is Dirk. You can actually follow Dirk on YouTube, but he's in these tiny little wee ski boots, holding these tiny little wee poles, ready to launch himself down this roller coaster. Linda, I love your eyes. You've got your video on. Your eyes are huge right now. All right. So what do you think? Those of you that are looking at the picture, is this a yeehaw, let's go? Is this a no way, not a chance? Are you in it for the money? Or if somebody else goes first, let me know in the chat. Where do you think you would see yourself in this? No way, not a chance. I'm seeing no way, never, all of that coming up. Anybody in a yeehaw, let's go? Anybody thinking that looks pretty darn cool? No, Carrie's shaking her head. No, no, no way, no way. Rather be boiled in oil. Judy, that's awesome. I like it. Now, sometimes I get people saying, I'll take the money and hopefully I can buy enough insurance that if something goes horribly wrong, at least my family's well taken care of. I use this. I use this because I think this is really how the last 3 years have felt to people, right? There have been some people who be like, and I'm going to go the opposite first. There are some people who've looked at the last 3 years and go, oh my gosh, look at what we've done. Look at how we've pulled together. Look at how we've been creative. Look at how we've managed to change. And then there's other people who are like, oh my gosh, please get me off of this Corona coaster. I am so done with it. I don't want to talk about it anymore. And I think then we get everything in between. It's important as a leader, when we talk about knowing what's expected, for us to think outside of our own experience. Because I think sometimes, we think people see things in the way that we do, and, they may be seeing it as an issue, we may not, or we may be seeing it as an issue and they may not. When I started doing these kind of presentations, more than 25 years ago now, but always talk about things such as traffic and weather. And, Dee and I were talking right at the beginning, what's the weather going to be like over the next 2 days? Like it's a topic of conversation. But, when we talk about sources of stress, we're also talking about the too much to do's and the not enough time to do it in. But right now, I think we're even more global. It's all of the impact on our association and the people within our organization. And so, how is that impacting? What are the sources of stress within your organization? What are the big things? What are the little things? From our research, as a leader, I think it's important that we understand what are some of these challenges. And I'm going to highlight some of these here. These are the ones that are consistently kind of top of mind, and they change from organization and they change from project to project. But kind of overall, these are the ones that we're seeing. I'm gonna I think I'll address the bottom one first and foremost, because job dissatisfaction is one that I'm seeing a lot of right now. We are not the same people who left 3 years ago the workplace. We're different people. We've questioned, we've evaluated, we've stepped away, we've stepped back into. Jobs have changed. And so maybe the job has changed and maybe the person has changed. Maybe the motivating parts of the job have been, maybe we don't even do that anymore. And so it's interesting. We need to be always doing that check-in of what is it that you like about this job? Or what is it that you like about this role? Sometimes it's not even a job. Like again, in the volunteer, it could be, what is it that you like about this role? What is it that you don't like about this role? Sometimes, like I said, we've taken away the things that used to give them that excitement. And so we need to do that check-in with them. Your role is to ask the right questions. What are some of those things within your colleagues, within your volunteers? What are their sources of stress? What are the big things? What are the little things? What am I seeing right now, kind of top of mind, is what I would call the hustle culture. Do you know what I mean by the hustle culture? Some of you might, you get up in the morning, what's the very first thing you do? Check messages, right? You go to the bathroom, you have a shower, you check messages because, hey, what did I miss in that short period of time? I'm eating my lunch. I'm having, I'm meetings while I'm eating. That's that kind of hustle culture. It's the harder, faster, stronger every single day. It's that push that we get into. And it's a collective. It happens within our organizations. It happens within our communities. It happens even in the way that we see ourselves. Sometimes we have this belief that overworking is the only path to success. And in fact, we have high profile leaders right now who are saying, like, if you're not working 23 hours a day, you're hardly working. If you're, it's those messages that I think are such garbage, but they contribute to the way that we see success. And so we know that hustle culture can lead to burnout. And we're seeing that burnout within our teams, within our organizations, within our volunteers. So we need to really tackle some of the beliefs. What are some of those things that shape the way that you see success, productivity, volunteering? It's an interesting piece. I grew up on a dairy farm in southwestern Ontario, and I played sports. My two boys played high level hockey, so sports analogies and sayings from the farm color the way that I see success. One of those ones is make hay while the sun shines. Any of you know what I mean by make hay while the sun shines? Yeah. So for 23 odd years, I've been pushing the ball uphill to talk about mental health and resiliency and stress within our organizations. COVID hits, and now leaders are really wanting to talk about it. And, make hay while the sun shines. I haven't said no to hardly anybody. I'm like, oh yeah, I can fit that in. Yeah, I can do 4 a day, no big deal. Presentations right across the country, virtual Zoom, I can do that. And then I'm thinking, well, it's going to slow down in another couple of months, so I'm going to say yes. And then when it slows down, I'll take my time off. Well, we're into year 3, and it hasn't slowed down. And nor do I necessarily want it to. But what I do need to do is make sure I'm taking better care of myself, because I've been putting myself on the back burner. So all the stuff that I talk about, mental health and resiliency and take self-care, I haven't necessarily always been listening to my own advice because I still have that, hey, if you take your foot off the gas, you're going to be back to where you were for the last 23 years. So, grab it while it's here. Um, Give it 110%. Here's a sports analogy. You cannot give 110%. And I think as leaders, we kind of get into that, we got to always be on, we got to always give. And hey, the problem is if I'm only giving 90%, somehow I'm failing. And I don't think that's the place where we need to be. A couple other ones, you can sleep when you're dead. Any of you ever heard that one? Or rest and relaxation are for the weak. Right? These are things, and logically we know that these are not kind of the way that we should be running our life, but at the heart level and in back of our heads sometimes they color the way that we see the world, and so we get caught up in this hustle culture. Personality plays a role. Are any of you perfectionists? Has to be done just right, just so, can't delegate it off because nobody does it the way you want it to be done. I see Carrie waving her hand there. Thank you. Any procrastinators? You wait for the stress level to get way up here there, Catherine. Perfect. Any workaholics? You're always hurrying, racing, obsessed with deadlines. Any of you problem solving even when you're supposed to be sleeping? Guilty as charged. Yeah, so personality plays into that kind of perception of success as well. So we need to address those. We need to address what that hustle, how does that hustle culture play in our organizations? What are our expectations about how people contribute? Is it realistic? Is it not realistic? Are some of our personalities, playing into some of this as well? I posted this graphic at the beginning of the pandemic and it went viral. I posted it again 6 months later. Same thing happened. It went around the world. I had people from South Africa and Australia all commenting on it. I posted it again 6 months later. Same graphic. Same thing happened. I think this one's up to like 15,000 people either commenting or sharing or liking. You can grab this if you want. Now, this is not rocket science. You've seen this before, but I think what happens is that sometimes when we're in the midst of this hustle, we forget to do some of these things. And so as a leader, I think it's really important that we help our teams to make sure that they're focused in on the right things. What are those things that they have control over? What are those things that they don't have control over? And just kind of allow people to understand that, hey, this is where we're going to spend our time and energy. We can't worry about the what ifs and all that other stuff. And so you can grab it, you can print it off, you can share it, you can post it. It's there for you to use as a resource. All right, that was number 2, knowing what's expected. Number three, they want to be able to speak up, which is an interesting one. I mean, again, we could talk about all kinds of pieces under there, but let's talk a little bit about communication. In the chat, let me know, what do you think? What is the purpose of communication? Throw your answer into the chat. What is the purpose of communication? To ask for help, to share ideas, to convey a message, understanding and sharing. These are great, good. To share important messages, verbal and nonverbal, to validate others as well, good. Now, I'm going to go even simpler when it comes to communication. It's from, when we kind of look at the basis of this, it's to get rid of the uncertainty. It's to get rid of as much gray as possible so that we can do all of these things, right? But it's to get rid of the uncertainty. And that sounds really easy, but it's a lot harder than we think because things get in the way. Faulty assumptions. You should always know what I mean. I should always know what you mean. And that communication will automatically just happen. Hey, we've been communicating for years, so it's just going to happen. And so these assumptions get in the way of that clarity that we're looking for, that getting rid of that uncertainty behind it. Here are three pictures. Let me know. What do you think? What are these pictures of? If you think you know what these are pictures of, throw them into the chat. 1, 2, and 3. What do you think these are pictures of? An apple core. Yes, Carrie, that is number 3. So it's an apple and an apple seed. Good. Skin. Judy, which one are you referring to? Number 2, maybe? Let's see. It is number 1. Okay. A tennis ball, number 1. It is not a tennis ball. It's not skin. Something I don't want to catch. I like it. There we go. Awesome, awesome. Inside of a flower, number 2. Good guess, Megan, but not quite. It's the inside of something, which is an interesting one. A grapefruit? No, good guess. I've got a couple grapefruits in there. Inside of an eye, inside of a fruit, inside of our brain. Oh, wow. All right, let's do number 1. Number 1 is actually, it's not a tattoo, it's not a tennis ball, some of the common ones I get, it's not a worm. It is actually the wrapper off of a Crayola crayon. Number 2 is a cat's tongue, a magnified version of a cat's tongue. And then number 3 was the apple seed. All right, so why are these up here? In this context, it's about, am I giving people enough of the message for it to make sense? Because often as leaders, we have all of this information way back here, but when we go to communicate, we only give them this one little piece. I like that. I'm never letting my cat lick me again. Yeah, you are. It will. There we go. It's all those little bumpies. So, are we giving people enough information in order to get rid of the uncertainty? So they're not looking at us going, why are we doing that? So how are we going to communicate? What did you do prior to the pandemic? What did you do during the pandemic? What are you going to do post-pandemic? What worked then? What are you going to move and take forward? What isn't working and how are you going to change it? And so we want to help people so that they're not struggling, so that they feel safe, so they know what the next step is, so that they have enough information in order to know how to respond. All right, number 4, it's the freedom from hostility. I could talk about harassment and bullying, diversity, equity, inclusion. Those are all kinds of things, and I'm sure you've got other programs on those. Communication has changed a lot since the pandemic due to technology, people working from home. Yeah, absolutely. And so we need to really touch base of, is this working? What do we want to do going forward? So let's talk about this freedom from hostility piece. I want to, talk a little bit, just maybe more around toxicity and attitudes and behaviors. We catch each other's emotions just like we catch a virus. We're not these emotional islands. We catch each other's good mood and we can catch each other's bad mood. What do we know? Well, as leaders, our mood has a bigger impact than person to person. So our mood strongly influences their mood, their attitudes, and the performance of your team. How do you start your meetings? How do you greet people? I'm not suggesting that you have to get up in the morning and go, yeehaw, let's go. But the energy that you bring has an influence on the way things moving forward. So I want you to think about that as well. Now, I love this model, and I'm going to take the time to talk a little bit about this model because this model is from Dr. Mary Lippitt. That's Lippitt. And I like this model because it's not about the how change is made, but how do we communicate change when we're going through that change? How, as leaders, do we give that message to make sure that we are getting rid of the gray as much as possible? And so here's how this kind of plays out, because it's also about the freedom from hostility and what are we seeing from the people around us. So if we're really good at communicating the change and we've addressed each of these areas, most of the time, people can make the change. But if something is missing, then we're going to see different reactions. So let's talk about the vision, which is kind of like the pictures that I just showed you. If people don't have the context for what it is they're hearing, what it is that you're communicating to them, then there's going to be a lot of confusion. Why are we doing this? I don't get it. Now, maybe you've been good at doing the vision, giving the context, but maybe you haven't talked about what skills do they need in order to make that change. And if people don't believe that they have the skills and the ability, there's going to be a lot of anxiety. Like, I don't know, I don't know how to do this. We put in a new process, we put in new technology. We ask people to work from home when they've never worked from home before, like at the beginning of COVID. People were like, what do you mean work from home? I don't even have a desk, let alone like, what do you mean Zoom? We're going to get together on what? Like, I don't understand. Maybe you've done the vision and the skills, but you haven't talked about the incentives. And when people don't know the what's in it for me, there's going to be a lot of resistance. Now you need to get really specific. How is this going to impact them at their job, at their, their task? How is it going to have an impact on them? And I'm going to use the pandemic as an example. At the beginning of the pandemic, again, I have two boys who are in their 20s. Very first messaging that came out said, hey, you guys, in your 20s who are already invincible, you are really not at risk. It's our elderly people who are at risk. And then we changed the messaging and we said, okay, you need to go, and this is not about vaccination, whether pro con, but we said, you need to go get vaccinated. You need to physically distance from your friends. You've got to stop going out to the bars and stuff. We're going to shut things down. And they're like, why? Well, because it's the right thing to do. Well, why? Well, because it's, it'll keep our elderly people safe. That's not the what's in it for me. It wasn't until about 18 months into the pandemic that I actually saw my first commercial and I went, somebody's finally gotten it. Because it was a commercial and it said, hey, if we get this thing under control, we're going to be able to go to concerts again. We're going to be able to go out to the bars and we're going to be able to hang out with our friends. That's the what's in it for me. And so when you're talking about these changes, you have to drill it down to what's in it for me. Now, you've done the vision, you've done the skills, you've done the incentives, but if you haven't given people the resources to do the change, to make the change, either the people resources or the technology, they're going to be really frustrated because most people want to do a good job at whatever task you've given them. But if they don't have what they need in order to do that, they're going to be very frustrated. And then the last one, the action steps. They want to know what steps do they need to take in order to make this change. And so in your communication, even if you don't know step 2, 3, 4, and 5, you have to say, okay, this is, again, COVID was a great example. There were days when we didn't know what was going to happen next week, next month, next year. Sometimes all we could say is, this is what we're going to work on first, and then we'll figure out the rest. We have to let them know what is the step that they need to take. I hope this is useful because sometimes when we make our announcements or when we're talking to our team about the change, we're going to see these different reactions. And that means we just go back to them and we just talk a little bit more about those particular areas in order to help people to feel comfortable in making that change. It also helps us to make sure that we've hit all of these areas when we're putting that together. So I hope that was a useful piece. Again, her name is Dr. Mary Lippitt, Lippitt, and you can find all kinds of great information on this model. Okay, number 5. Number 5 is that our teams, our people, our volunteers, they need to feel like they belong to something. Again, we know this, we've heard this before, but it's fundamentally hardwired into our DNA. And I think one of the biggest things that we've seen over the last 3 years is when people have felt really isolated, that sense of loneliness and not that disconnection. It has been a real impact on people. People are stressed out. We used to talk a lot about the fight and flight response, and I'm not going to talk, I think everybody on here has already heard about this. But we used to think that fight and flight response was our predominant way of responding as we go through changes and challenges and crisis. But we now know that there's something even stronger than our fight and flight response. If it was all about fight and flight, we wouldn't have emergency responders, people who go into burning buildings, because if it's all about, protecting myself, why would I ever put myself at risk to save somebody else? So this response that I'm talking about is what we call our tend and befriend response. It's that instinct to protect the tribe, that instinct to belong to something bigger than ourselves. That is what, allows, somebody to, have that sense of connection to the people around them. And that will actually counterbalance our fight and flight response. It's one of our keys to resiliency. So how are you connecting as a team? Is it different than before? What's it going to be like as you get back together if you haven't already got back together? Or maybe you're hybrid, or maybe you only see your volunteers on an irregular basis. How are you going to connect to them? That's a really big piece to this, because we can activate this state. When we activate this state, it helps to build that sense of resiliency. We know that people are stronger, they're more motivated, they are more courageous. They're able to buffer themselves against stress. And so we can activate this this state in a number of ways. It's about this mindset that we have of togetherness. So whenever we, whenever we have all of those celebrations, birthdays, anniversaries, projects, that's one way of activating this state. Whenever we work together on common goals, and so when we're working together as volunteers or on a project and we have kind of that goal in mind, that activates that state. Whenever we share our stories about how we've overcome or the challenges that we faced, that connects us and binds us together. And so whenever we elicit this within our group, it helps us to be stronger, to be more resilient. So I want you to think, as a leader, it's not just about respect and appreciation, but it is about this sense of belonging as well. Because I think these two things go hand in hand. It helps people to see that they matter, that they're not in it alone, that there's people that they can rely on, that there's influences that they have. All right, number 6 is about leadership and leadership support. And again, this builds into the one that I just talked about. But I want to take it from the aspect of mental health. My background is in mental health and resiliency. I worked with the Canadian Mental Health Association for a number of years. And so really it's understanding when people feel disconnected, the impact that it has and the role that a leader plays in helping people to feel connected. It's also about how we deal with issues around burnout, because we're seeing high rates of burnout right now. So what do you think? Around the world, so this is a study from around the world. What do you think is the percentage of people who are experiencing moderate to severe burnout? Here's your choices. Let's do this here. So 79, 22, 40, or 15. What do we see in here? So I'm seeing 40, 45, so some guesses coming in. Good, the guesses are kind of close on. 40 and 79 seem to be the top two. Good. All right, so we're talking about burnout. 40% of us are experiencing around the globe moderate to severe, but 79% of us are experiencing some of the symptoms of burnout. This is a big issue within our teams, within our volunteers. And we often talk about volunteer burnout. So how do we deal with this, and what does that look like? We know that that's up about 15% higher than what it was prior to the pandemic. Some industries, it's going to be much higher. Some countries, it's going to be much higher. Other industries, other countries, other areas, it's going to be lower. But we know that it's up. We know that it's up prior than what it was to the beginning of the pandemic. So burnout, for me, it's about losing your fire. We talk about it as being fatigued and frustrated, being overworked, underappreciated. It's about the physical, the emotional, the mental symptoms associated with burnout. Again, it is about workplace. And so we look at some of these symptoms. You can, again, here's an infographic that you can tap into. You can use the QR code to take you there. It's part of a much bigger infographic. You can use your phone to get there. Turn it onto camera mode and hold it up to the QR code, or you can go to my website under the info and resources hub, look for infographics, and you'll find it there. These are some of the symptoms. And what am I seeing more of right now? Really, the top one is one of the ones that I'm hearing more of, that it's taking people longer to do things, to write that email, to get that report done, to follow through on things, because they don't seem to have the energy and the ability. There's that sense of exhaustion that, people are having trouble focusing. Uh, if we categorize these, some of them are under the category of exhaustion, some of them are under the category of futility, which is an interesting kind of word, and then some are under the kind of category of avoidance. And so futility, it's the cynicism, the negativity, the toxicity is really part of is coming out in a lot of workplaces. And then that sense of just that overall sense of dread. So we see this again, it's higher than what it is before, but what do you do with that? And I think as a leader, we need to be really aware of what causes people to be burned out. What are some of the top hazards in our workplaces, in our organizations, in our teams? So, do they have way too much to do and not enough time to do it in? Maybe during the pandemic, they didn't have things that they were doing, or maybe they had way too many things to do. But is that sustainable going forward? Is it the right amount of work for that volunteer, or are we overloading our team members? Do they have control? Are they being appreciated? When people don't feel like they're being recognized and appreciated, it increases their risk for burnout 490%. That's huge when we talk about that, the importance of recognition and appreciation. And then, is it fair? Do they have that sense of belonging? Are they able to bring their skills to the table? And these are things that you're probably quite adept at talking to within your teams. So, a couple things. What are the expectations? Are they clear? Have you outlined them? Are you measuring based on deliverables? One of the ones that I think is really important is, are you easy and predictable to read? Or are they constantly trying to think like, are they happy with me? Do they like what I'm doing? I worked in an organization where I had a wonderful boss, but that person left, and then along came this new person, and I had no idea if they liked what I was doing, if they didn't like what I was doing, if they agreed with me or they didn't agree with me, because they had this poker face, and somehow they thought that they needed to keep, their cards really tight to the chest. So are they able to read you? Do we have this kind of sense of being able to be connected together? All right, I'm going through these rather quickly. Like I said, there's lots of pieces, but the idea is to remember what the needs are, and then how can you maybe tap into some of these things? So here's a quick one. I've already talked a little bit about the resources. Do they have the resources to do their job? But it's not just the big things. Sometimes it's the little things. I was working with one municipality. The leader brought me in to talk about resiliency, because this team was going to be implementing a really big change. And it was prior to COVID, so we were in person and people were at their tables. And one of the things I asked them is, on the flip chart, let me know what some of the big things are and some of the little things are that are causing stress within your team. And so as I kind of peeked in on everybody, every single piece of paper had the word stapler. I'm like, that is really odd. Okay, so then I go to debrief and everybody gave me a couple of things off their list, and not one team mentioned the stapler, yet it was on everybody's piece of paper. So I had to ask, what's up with the stapler? Somebody very sheepishly put up their hand and said, well, we have one stapler on this team and nobody seems to know where the stapler is, and nobody puts the stapler back, and we get ticked off at each other because of this. And everybody, and you're thinking, really? Why didn't somebody go out and buy the $1.49 stapler? It was a municipality. There was lots of red tape. Nobody knew whose job it was. The leader had no idea that this was one of their sources of stress. This was a team who was good at dealing with crises. That's what they were designed to do. Yet it was one of these annoying little things that was getting under their skin. So are we asking the right questions? Do your volunteers, do your team members and colleagues, do they have everything they need in order to be as productive as they need to be? What does that look like for them? Is their workspace, is the environment, is it designed for safety and productivity and to inspire them? Does it give them the flexibility that they need? These are all really good questions. Excuse me. All right. Number 8, they want to be able to bring the best of themselves to the table. They want to be able to use their talents. Have you tapped in to what their talents are? And when people don't feel like they can use their talents, they're likely to leave. Now, this is a bit of a trick question. I won't put you through this, but it's the answer is actually false, because they're 12 times more likely to leave when they're not able to use their time and their talents. So thinking about that, are you asking good questions? What do you like? What do you don't like? Is there anything that you're overlooking about that person? Are you underutilizing them in any sort of way? Can you help give them the skills that they need in order to grow or take on different responsibilities? Can they, have these stretch assignments? What are some of those things that will help them to be engaged and to develop within your organization? Number 9. Number 9, they want periods of calm, not days, not weeks, not months, but just these moments of calm. We've come through this, and almost a quarter of us have said we've had a lot of trouble disconnecting. And have you felt that way? That you feel like you're constantly on? It's that wake, work, sleep, repeat cycle. Maybe you're running on empty. Maybe you've neglected your own needs, because you're always giving it to other people. We know that wake, work, sleep, repeat pattern can lead to burnout. So what are you doing? What are you doing for yourself in this case? And how are you helping your teams to be able to manage that, to have those periods of calm? What are the boundaries? Talking for yourselves, like, do you have your own boundaries? Maybe it's, I don't do any work on Sundays, or I don't send emails after 6 o'clock, or I don't answer emails before 7 o'clock in the morning, or I take a break at lunchtime, and I don't schedule meetings during my lunchtime. These are some of the boundaries, and we need to have those conversations with our teams, with our volunteers, so that they realize that there's boundaries, that it's okay to say no if there's if they've got too much on their plate at any given time. When you're scheduling, do you build white space into your schedule, or do you go from meeting to meeting to meeting, which I think is a really big issue right now? I've seen companies where they've said, we end meetings at quarter to the hour so that people have time to have a bio break. My point is that enough? Because if you've just come through a meeting and you've now been committed to 3 or 4 different things that you've got to do you have enough time to actually get that done? Or are you going from meeting to meeting to meeting, and then you have to work all evening doing the things that you just spent all that time saying that you would do? We need to get that back under control. Do we have white space? I now do things. So when I have a meeting with a client, maybe it's only a half an hour meeting, but I block off an hour and a half in my schedule. And the reason I do that is because, hey, if I'm meeting with somebody like Dean, I know that once I say, we have that meeting, I have things that I need to get to him. I have things that I need to put together and contemplate and create. And so I'm going to make sure that I have that time scheduled. That's my white space to think and to put things together. It is about recovery. And do we have enough time for that to actually happen? To go from up here to down here, so that we're better able to deal with all the stuff that's going on. All right. Whew. Dean, I'm going to make it. Last little bit. I've got more than 5 minutes here. The last one, number 10, is strategic hope. And this may not be one that you've actually heard of before, because we've actually been told that hope is not a business strategy. But I'm going to tell you that hope is absolutely a business strategy. And in fact, it is one of the essential needs. Because we know hopelessness, that lack of hope, can lead to despair. And we've seen that sense of loneliness, that sense of disconnection. Hope is what allows us to be able to take that step forward. And in fact, our research actually shows that of all the different characteristics and their ability to predict our resiliency, hope was the most significant moderator in the face of change and challenge and trauma. So how do we pull that forward? What does that mean for us as leaders? Well, we know a couple of things. Hope is about having goals. So it's not about being whimsical and, when you blow the candle out on the birthday cake and you wish for, rainbows and unicorns, that's whimsical. But in the case of strategic hope, it's about having a vision of where you're going. And I think that's a really important part. I go back to the communication chart. What's the vision? What's the big picture? And so when we talk about eliciting hope, it's about having that big picture, but it's also about having the energy to be able to do that. If you're completely tired out and worn out, you don't have the energy to take the steps forward towards that goal. And then finally, it's about the flexibility. It's about being able to problem solve, that if my way gets blocked, that I can find another way to get there. I can go around it. I can go over it. I can go under it. It's about our ability to problem solve. But again, having the energy to problem solve also requires that energy. So hope is about bringing it. It's about creating hope. It's not about wishing for hope. It's about creating that hope within our teams. And we can absolutely engage that as a strategy as a leader. You know, it's about dreaming big. It's about giving the vision. It's about being the cheerleader. It's not about being Pollyanna. It's about being realistic. But it's, hey, you know what? I know we can get there because we have the skills and the ability. We've done it before and we can do it again. This is one of the quotes that has kept me going through the pandemic. I love this quote from Desmond Tutu. Hope is being able to see the light despite the darkness. And I think it's really important that we, as leaders, we shine that light. Sometimes all we can say is, hold on, possibility exists. I don't know how we're going to do it, but I know that we can. And so it's really about being the voice of hope, because sometimes that's all we can do. Now, I put together this video. I was thinking about this prior to the pandemic. I put together this video on December of 2019. It was released February of 2020. I think the timing of this was really good. If you want to watch this video on strategic hope, you can either use the QR code or type in my really long last name into the YouTube search engine, and you will find me and you'll find this video. But I encourage you to watch it, to share it, because you never know who needs to hear this particular message right now. Whew. I have come through all 10 of these, essential needs. The idea is not about being perfect. The idea is about what is it that I need to do with my teams right now? What's going to help them to be engaged, to be creative, to collaborate, to be able to move forward? And so when I look at where do you go? Where's your team right now? How are they doing? And then how can I help them to be the best that they can be? Focusing in on mental health and workplace well-being. And then what are the policies? What are the procedures? What are the things that I need to do for myself and for them in order to be able to move that forward? So I hope I've given you some things to think about, some places to start. There's no such thing. And again, I don't know if it's got the survey link in there already in the chat. Thank you, Dean. But you can use the QR code. Let me know what you liked. Let me know what you didn't like. Let me know what you'd like to see more of, because I would absolutely love to bring one of these other presentations to you at some point. There's only a few questions. I don't collect your name. I won't spam you with anything. I have no way of identifying you, so you can let me know through the evaluation what you like. But know that you're not in it alone, because there's all kinds of materials on the website, over 500 articles on mental health and leadership and resiliency. So if you go to the Work Smart, Live Smart website, you'll find all of that, including the infographics that I talked about. Phew, that is it. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, share in the conversation. Let's keep this moving forward. And I want to thank you so much. Whoops, too fast. For joining me today. Whew.
Hi, Megan. Did you want to ask a question? Go ahead, please.
Oh, did I miss a question, Dean, in the chat somewhere?
Megan had her hand up, as did.
That was applause. Okay, there we go. Awesome.
In the event there are questions, folks can send them to me, professionaldevelopment@pavro.on.ca, and I'll be pleased to chase after Beverly to get some answers for you and share them with you. That was an awesome message, Beverly. What was that? TMS, timely, meaningful, and
specific.
Yeah. The big ahas for me were the things that you can control and you cannot control. That's a very, very effective message. And the other one was the Lipit framework. I think that's really awesome when you're dealing with an organization trying to feel feel out what it wants to do and it can't seem to get there from here, that little framework really does help. On behalf of the Pavril community and everybody that joined us today, thank you for your professionalism and your tremendous delivery. I'm here to help all of the folks who are here learn more. And thank you again, Beverly.
Oh, you're welcome. Dean, I can stay on for a few minutes. So if anybody does have questions, I know some of you are tight in timelines and you need to go, but if some of you want to stay on and you have a couple questions for me, I will stay on and answer those. I have no problem doing that.
Sure, I'll do the same for those that have work to do. Great. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Oh, I'm glad that you were pleased that you came. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Catherine, for that. Awesome. Thank you for everybody that's saying thank you. Fantastic. Thank you, Judy. Awesome.
That was amazing, Beverly. Thank you. It was very timely for stuff going on in my world. So I really appreciate the tools and the concepts that you've shared. I think you've given me some stuff I can take back to try to affect some change.
Awesome. Linda, if you have any questions, you know what, and as you're kind of going through that, you can always email me directly and just say, hey, Beverly, I was in this session with you today, and I'd be glad to answer those for you.
That's amazing. Thank you. I love your energy. Oh my God.
Oh,
I want
thank
to
you.
bottle your energy. It's
Ah,
awesome.
thank
That's
you.
what I was looking at it, and I don't know that I was thinking energy, but resilience and building it and all of the and dealing with burnout are all fairly heavy issues, and you came across this in such a positive way. So it makes, well, of course we can fix this. We just have to, follow those rules and follow the frameworks and all that stuff. But there are things we can do,
And not to kind of put a slant on that. It is hard, it is difficult, right? But there are steps that we can do to keep us moving forward and to help people so that they don't fall through the cracks, so they don't feel like they're in it by themselves.